Hi, everybody. It's Neal Brennan. It's the Blocks Podcast. My guest today, I just called him the last living American comedy writer. The last 20 years, you're probably more familiar with his work than you realize. Longtime SNL writer. 7 years? Four, but it was powerful. Did a show called Man Seeking Woman on FX, and then you did another show on TBS with Steve Buscemi and Daniel Radcliffe about God, and I don't remember the name of it.
All good. Miracle Workers.
Yeah. And he's got several books, the latest of which is called Glory Days, coming out July 23rd. And his name is Simon Rich. Say hello.
Hello. Thanks.
Hi, yes.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, good to have you. I met you 20 years ago. You were in college. You were about to get a book published. This is 2005, I think.
Yeah.
And you were about to get a book published. And I think I don't know why I met him. I don't know. I was like, yeah, he's funny. I'll meet with him. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, just be funny. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
And then you ended up writing for SNL, and you wrote with Mulaney and America Sawyer a lot, right?
Yeah.
But we talked before this about you don't do much press. And by the way, he's 40. If you're watching this, he's 40. So imagine how he looked when he was 20. You don't do much press, and I'm curious as to you're one of the few people. When I say you're like the last living comedy writer, it's like you're not especially interested in fame. Like even David Sedaris is more interested in fame than you are.
Right. Well, I'm not on social media. That's sort of the big one. Is I'm one of the first people to reject social media because I was classmates with Mark Zuckerberg at Harvard.
What did you guys think of him?
I didn't know him personally.
Okay.
But I knew about Facebook or the Facebook when it was launched. My roommate was, I think, maybe the 10th or 12th person to sign up for this new service that had started across the campus.
Did you go to school with Jared Kushner?
He's a little older than me.
Because I remember I've heard someone said his reputation in college was he was craven and amoral. It's like, that's a pretty great college rep.
That feels like redundant if you're describing a Harvard undergraduate. I mean, but yeah, this thing Facebook started, and it was just like watching a friend suddenly like try crack and their life.
Your roommate.
Yeah. And you're just like, oh, this is not a drug that anyone should try. And I felt like really, I'm like,
one of those things where you'd get back to your room and he'd be on it and you'd be like, the fuck are you
doing?
His
life has completely changed. All he cares about is
from the earliest iteration of the Facebook.
Yeah, from moment one. It's like, I had this friend who was a normal, happy, well-adjusted person. They've become addicted to this very scary thing. I should never try this. And what a sad coincidence that I happen to be roommates with this like weird, unique addict. And then you look out the window like a zombie movie, and you're like, oh, it's spread to everybody. And I thought surely
you were roommates with Patient Zero.
Exactly. And I thought surely they'll ban this. The teachers, and we'll get together with the administrators.
I remember 9/11. I thought they're not going to show this footage much.
Yeah, right.
I didn't think they were going to show the planes much on television. I was like, oh, I was very wrong about that.
Yes.
And that's a fairly conscious decision. Like, oh, this is bad.
As crazy as it is to say, it was way less moral in the early days.
It was the hot or not thing, right? Or that was after that?
It basically was a tool for stalking when it was first invented.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would tell you the
I'm picturing Mark Zuckerberg on stage being like, it's a tool for stalking.
Thank you. It would tell you which campus computer the person had last signed in on.
Jesus.
So you had the Kushners of the world, just looking up people and seeing, she's at Science Center B. Let's go. So it had a really like weaponized, antagonistic vibe to it. It wasn't the Facebook that like our moms are all on today. It was much more hostile and intense.
That's wild.
Yeah. Agreed.
And then what do you? And then tell me, you're one of the few people that's not interested. One of the few people in America who's not interested in being famous.
Yeah.
Why? What am I missing?
Right. Well, it's two things. So one thing is just I made the decision really early on to not do the social media thing because I was like frankly frightened of it.
Yeah.
Frightened of how much time it would consume, and I just didn't want to go anywhere near it. And the other thing is I just never thought that I would be a successful, famous person.
Yeah.
Because, as a writer of fiction, I write short stories and novels, and for TV and film, the most important thing to do is to have a protagonist that is like rootable and likable and sympathetic.
Yeah.
And I just never saw myself like, I'm self-aware enough to know that I myself was never going to be like a compelling protagonist for people. I would much rather write protagonists.
Is it
would.
Because you know yourself too well? Because you seem like a nice, moral guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you're
the
father of two, happily married.
But my protagonists are way more sympathetic. You know,
got it.
It's like I can't compete with like a sweet talking bear in the forest too. You know, like I can always come up with a character that's way more appealing.
Yeah, the
myself.
trick is you make yourself seem like the sweet talking bear.
And that's the thing I can never do.
Yeah.
Is the lying part.
Yeah.
I would rather make up a fictional world than lie about my own.
Yeah, you're too ethical.
It's just hard. It's hard for me to pull it off. I'm also a bad liar in person.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you see the spoils of it, right?
Yeah.
You have many famous friends, and it's like you see the spoils of fame and money and wealth and access and status, and and you're still like, no.
There are advantages too, though. I mean, for example, like
and there's advantages to anonymity.
Absolutely. As a writer, I mean, there really are. I mean, you're less branded. There are a number of like many of the film and TV projects that I've worked on that like your listeners would know about don't have my name on it.
Meaning you did Punch Up?
Or story work or any number of things.
Will you tell us or no?
No, they make you sign things.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, and that kind of anonymity actually can be like it can widen the scope of what you're allowed to do.
Oh, that's interesting. Like you do darker things than I would think.
Oh yeah.
It's an ominous. Oh yeah. Okay, so you've been a professional comedy writer for 20 years since I met you. You were a senior at Harvard, published a book. You were writing for the Lampoon. Then you got hired at SNL. What did you think was happening?
I always loved writing because it was like a refuge for me, a refuge from anxiety, and it was like,
that's his first block is anxiety.
Anxiety, which is not a shocker probably.
No.
Yeah, but it was like this with writing. I could kind of go into my room and just be completely, totally in control of what I was writing, and so it was like my safe activity. And then I got hired at SNL, and I thought, well, this is going to be great for my anxiety because I could write all the time because I'll be a professional writer.
Right.
But it turned out.
But you're writing about 24 hours in the rest of the time.
It turned out that it did not relieve my anxiety.
You made a lot of producing and talk. Whenever I'm at SNL, I'm like, I cannot believe the amount of socializing they have to do.
It's unbelievable.
It's like unfucking barrel and like complimenting sketches. I like that move, and you're just like, what do you?
Yeah,
it's so odd to me.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just what it is. It's just like a cocktail party kind of.
Well, the first half of the week is like bliss because you're just like ensconced in your tiny room with your favorite writers to write with, or your cast to write with, and you're writing whatever you want. You have total freedom. No one comes in and says like, you've got to write about X political issue. You can do anything. So and then
who did you wrote with Mulaney, America?
Mulaney and America
Bill?
a lot. Wrote with Bill a lot. Wrote with
anything like what are your most known sketches?
Our most known sketches, I mean, probably What's That Name?
Hello and welcome to What's That Name? The rules are simple. We show you a person, you tell us their name.
It's a great sketch.
Which is when we just went full tilt and made Bill Hader's game show host an actual psychopath, which we had been drifting there for years. Bill would play.
You finally just named Bill what he is. Okay.
Because we had the default when I got to SNL was game show host. We're still kind of in the Phil Hartman game show host mold. They were oily and sleazy and cheesy. Certainly, like they lacked humanity, but they weren't like active antagonists. And
well, what's funny is when I think of that sketch, I don't think of Bill.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think of the premise of the sketch, which is we all interact with so many people, and there are people whose names you should know that you don't know.
Totally.
I'm one of your closest friends. Hey, Todd.
And I've been his girlfriend for 4 years. What's my name?
Hey, great to see you.
I guess thinking about it, Bill is goading the contestants.
Yeah, he's the antagonist, right? He's the one who is twisting the knife.
Guess you just don't consider her a human being.
What kind of horrible game show is this?
It's What's That Name?
I don't know if you ascribe whose idea it was, but was that the point of the sketch?
No, but it became the point of the sketch.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because it very quickly morphed from like a premise-driven sketch into a character sketch.
Great.
Once we realized that Bill is the devil, essentially.
But also,
actually
like,
Satan.
He's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong. That's what makes him so dangerous.
It's just he's being rude.
Yeah.
He's cornering people.
We had a whole backstory for Bill's game show character, which is that he was independently wealthy and funded the game show himself just to torture people.
Great. You ever read The Magic Christian?
Of course.
One of the best pure comedy books ever.
Terry Southern.
Like just a great premise.
Yeah, very similar.
Very well executed.
Very similar to What's That Name? Yeah.
It's a guy who's a billionaire and just used it to fuck with people.
Yeah.
And I still think someone should make it.
They've tried a million times.
They actually did make it. It was bad.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Terry Southern, did you know, wrote for Saturday Night Live?
I did know that.
For one season.
I did a Terry Southern deep dive back before I met you.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrote with Bill, wrote with Mulaney, wrote with Marica, and how did that affect your anxiety?
Well, writing with them was a blast.
Right, yeah.
It was thrilling. It was like I had company to people to write with. But then I got...
And it must have been fun to have kindred spirits when you meet kindred spirits they weren't Harvard Lampoon people.
Totally.
It must have been like, oh, great, you guys aren't... Mulaney, you only went to Georgetown. You dummies. A bunch of civilians. But it must have been like very heartening and exciting.
It was thrilling. Yeah. It's like this, it really feels like a miracle. I mean, everybody, or not to generalize, but many people who get into professional comedy writing have had unusual childhoods.
Yeah.
And so SNL, when it was at its most fun, it felt like there is this support group, this friend group that I've always wanted.
Yeah.
And then you get
are you from a tricky childhood?
No, that's why this show, I'm nervous about this show because it's called Blocks, which
I'm not trying to like unearth your family.
Yeah.
I'm just more
fine.
curious. Yeah.
No, I've come from an extremely privileged.
Privilege I don't care about, but I'm wondering like, your dad was just like a journalist, right? It wasn't like blue blood. Was it blue bloody?
No, he was a theater critic.
Right.
But he was the theater critic.
Right. But I'm saying like that theater critic sounds like a job where you make millions of dollars and you're paid in rubies or something. You just like, I wrote for New York Magazine. Like it wasn't like, I don't know. It never. I would assume he didn't make that much money.
No, I mean, not compared to, but I bet I went to very fancy prep schools.
Okay.
So I went to the high school that Gossip Girl is based on.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
that's Waldron.
Dalton.
Yeah. Got it.
Waldron's better though. Like if we were in a TV writer's room, we would punch up Dalton to Waldron.
Fantastic. And did you like the kids? Did you feel like did you figure it out?
I had a sort of strange. Should we get into it? Should we get into the whole thing?
The thing that I don't like the term. This thing about privilege and all this shit. It seems like it's an intentional plan from you. You're like, I shall go to they just go to the school and you go, okay, I'm going to go to the school. Yeah. And then later on you find out that they were all, oil bear or whatever. Yeah. It's never this premeditated hostile thing of like, I shall be a leader of this. You're a fucking comedy writer.
Right.
Like, so anyway, what did you think of that world?
What did I think of it? There were like multiple worlds within the school because there was one world that was literally the richest people in America.
Yep.
So they had their own sort of bubble. They had houses in the Hamptons and that was I had sort of a front row seat to like watch what that was. But but that was they lived in they took different classes than we did.
Did they really?
Yeah, and they
In the same building?
Yeah, they had these sort of easier classes that were designed to allow children of affluence to continue. At Harvard, they have something called the Z List. Do you know what the Z List is?
No, I have no idea. I can't wait to hear it.
Pretty sure Kushner was a Z List kid. So the Z List is
donors, kids.
Yes. Yeah, to get on the Z List, I mean, I think you need to donate like particle accelerators. It's not like
you have to donate equipment.
Yeah,
it's not just money.
It's promises.
Yes.
Ambassadorships.
Land.
Yeah, exactly. Great. And so pardons. But the Z List is like you have a student who is so academically inept that no
tutor can help.
No tutor, no study drug, no recommendation from a senator can mask the fact that this is
this person does not belong here.
This is a dumb person.
Yes,
and to let them in would be just too disgusting, even by the standards of Harvard.
It gives nepotism. It makes nepotism blush.
Exactly. This is too much. This is a bridge too far.
Like, guys, come on.
Yeah, you picture it's like a guy in like a full robe and like a white wig and like a tower at Harvard, just like looking at Kushner's transcript, and it's just like, I cannot stomach this.
Work with me on this.
Yeah.
So meet me halfway.
Exactly. So the halfway is called the Z List, and what they do is they concoct a fake volunteer project that lasts a year. That is the front, the cover, to justify their admission. So as typical Z-List kid, they're a little bit older than you. They have a last name that you've heard of because it matches one of the buildings that you maybe live in or the scholarship maybe that you're on.
Yep.
And they have a great tan because they've spent a year, in a southern hemisphere location. And
fake helping people.
And they've been building like wells. And you're like, oh.
And do they get class credit?
No, but they write like an essay, or somebody writes an essay for them about like, here's what I learned building these wells. And that tricks, I don't know who it's designed to trick. I think it might be designed to trick the child themselves.
God damn it.
That they belong.
They're like, it's like that bat kid thing. Remember that kid, the terminally ill bat? And they were like, you're bat.
You're a bat. That's what.
And that's what celebrity is, and that's what fame and wealth are
that's
anyway.
What class is. That's what wealth is. It's you're a bat kid. Everyone is like, you're a bat kid. And you're like, oh, I guess I
am great.
I guess
I thought I was great.
Yeah. So I knew a lot of kids like that.
Does that... This is This is not in any way emotional. This is more ideological.
Yeah.
How cynical does seeing that make you?
Oh, wow.
Because you also saw... You also dealt with incredibly intelligent people, like Mike Schur, who went to Harvard Lampoon. Mike Schur's and created Parks and Rec, Good Place, like a fucking crusher of a writer.
Yeah,
I once played Words with Friends with him, and he did 2 words I'd never heard of. So there are people that like some of it's nepotism and like fucking rich kid privilege, and some kids just have incredible brains.
When you graduate from Harvard and they give you the diploma, there's a slip with those 2 words in it, and they're like, if you're ever in a situation,
you really need to put the hammer down.
Yes. Well, what's interesting.
How cynical does it make you? Or what's it make you think of the world?
Well, it doesn't match the world at all because you know that you're in this sort of alien landscape that has no correlation with society. Because another thing about Harvard is the smartest people there are often the poorest people you've ever met in your life.
Yes, that's what I mean. Like, so you're meeting super brains, and then you're meeting, and what's the breakdown roughly?
It changes every year. I'm not sure exactly what it is now, but you never see either pole because the extremely poor kids are literal geniuses who are there because they've maybe cured a disease or invented
accidentally
a robot that the military had to like buy before it could be used against them. Or, they're actually the smartest people on earth. So you don't see them unless you're one of them.
Because they're just in labs.
They're in a laboratory.
Yeah.
Like literally trying to cure cancer.
Yeah.
Actively like solving.
Not doing a great job. By the way.
Yeah, seriously. Like the clock's ticking, guys.
Come on.
Yeah. And then the sort of Z-list kids belong to these things called final clubs, or finals clubs, I don't remember, which are secret societies, and they literally have these plush like clubhouses that you're not allowed into. And they
all right, well here's the simple question. Who's running the world? Meaning Because I don't really believe in like the Bilderbergs, and I don't really believe in conspiracy theories, even knowing about fucking finals clubs and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're dumb. So they can't, they might be devious, but they're not intelligent. So I guess I'm like, who's in charge of the earth?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay. Which one is he?
He's neither. He was neither.
And I'm not literally, was he in a finals club or was he in a lab?
Right.
Which is he closer to? Because he's pretty smart. He's a pretty sharp dude. I mean, he created a Frankenstein's monster. But
he's somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, he had a similar background, I would imagine, as me and many Lampoon writers did, which is to say, like, went to a good high school and probably wasn't considered a genius by the standards of Harvard, but was certainly considered smart. And he picked the right interest in the right field.
Yeah.
But he is the most powerful person by far from my generation.
Of course.
Not even close.
Yeah. But so what do you know, having sort of grown up in this and not necessarily of it, but sort of you weren't like a scholarship kid. What do you think? Like, you know what I mean? You know what I'm getting at? Like because I want to dispel, I'm always trying to dispel conspiracies. And it's like, it's just greed.
Right.
So do you think he had a devious plan?
Oh, do I think Zuckerberg had a devious...
Or anyone, any of these people. It's like...
Yeah. Right. Is there like an actual, like true, like secret oligarchy at the top? And
for lack of a better term, yeah.
I would say there is, but it's not as well organized as people think it is.
Right.
There aren't like secret handshakes and hats and like private caves and
it's
tunnels.
Just sort of like we'll help each other.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a loose affinity that very powerful people have.
He's one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a famous thing I forget where I saw this, but it was like a test to join the CIA or whatever the proto CIA was, like in the early days of government intelligence. And it was like they were trying to recruit the best and the brightest. And it was 20 questions. And this would have been early Cold War, or maybe even, earlier. And the first like 7 questions required you to know like super advanced trigonometry. And there was a question about like how to defuse bombs. And there were like 4 questions that made sure, of course, that you have perfect mastery of Russian and French. And then question 17 is like, when you're playing golf at the Montclair Club and you're on the 9th hole, which putter ought you to use?
Yeah.
And if you don't know the answer to that, you're dead. Instant fail. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to blend in among powerful people, and you don't want to be the guy with a sand wedge or whatever.
God damn it!
Another one like that is there was a scholarship, which I don't know if it exists anymore, but there were all of these scholarships you could win at Harvard, which were mostly like good, like well-intentioned philanthropic things to help like geniuses do their work. So if you were like
dirty geniuses, scrubby geniuses,
so you're a brilliant person, and you might be awarded a grant to study in Oxford or whatever, and continue your pursuit of some medical cure. And there was one that was just given for years to the most popular rich kid, and it was I forget what it was called, but it was just like an all expense paid apartment in, I believe, Berlin, and a stipend to throw parties. And the idea behind it was, it's probably a good idea for the future of mankind for like the powerful people in this country to have like old drinking friends with our rival nations.
Yeah. And then I go,
and you're like, maybe that's a good idea.
Because where my head goes is like, we're of the same ilk, and I would probably give you a benefit of some doubt.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just because like, I know where he's from. I met him when he was a kid. Like mutual friends, like, and there's nothing especially evil about it. It's just human nature.
It is human nature.
Tell me, so how's the anxiety in your body?
For starters, as a Jew, I think you want anxiety.
Your head on a swivel. You
want that. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of synonymous.
Yeah. I mean, like you want to be the Jew in 1932 who is like, maybe it's in my head, but
yeah,
this seems like,
is it me?
Yeah. You don't want to be the Jew in 1932 who is like, honey, relax. Like
I said that recently. Like all of the open-minded settlers got arrows in their heart.
Exactly.
Like so you need to be.
Yeah.
It still pays to be suspicious. It used to really pay.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm 99 according to 23andMe, I'm 99.6% Ashkenazi Jew and 0.4% Neanderthal, which means that I'm anxious in my body.
Yes.
All the time, and then like once a month, my body is like, you should get a steak. You should eat like a steak.
Right, and then you have indigestion.
And I feel really sick. Yeah. And Jew's like, what was that?
I am a Jew.
Yeah. Exactly.
And everyone every family, everybody's just a little anxious?
Yeah, all the time.
Is it neuroses or is it like in your body nerves? I would say I'm neurotic, and I define neuroses as, and I'm getting better with it, but having a feeling about a feeling.
Yeah.
Questioning my feeling, like
yeah.
I don't have much anxiety in my body that I'm aware of.
I think I have a lot of anxiety in my body, in my face, and my my shoulders, and I think that's probably as much a part of it as like the racing thoughts.
And you would say you have racing thoughts? For
sure, but I don't when I'm writing.
Here's what I'll say about your writing, though. It is a racing thought.
Right.
Your writing especially is like so organized and so premisey.
Right.
And so like, run it again.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can, like, what is the, I mean, I hate to say you've monetized it or you professionalized your anxiety.
Yeah, that was the plan all along. That was like truly my plan as a child, because I had this like, it would be like if you were addicted to fast food as a child, and you're like, I just love fast food. Like I love eating fast food.
Franchise.
And when I grow up, I'm gonna be, I'll be a professional fast food taster. And people would be like, that's not a job. Like, and it's not healthy. And like, it's but that's what happened to me. Like I basically ended up, as you said, like monetizing my primary coping mechanism.
And what was your mother's job?
She was a book editor.
Okay, so you had access to like that path. It wasn't.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't like I've got this pipe dream of being a.
No, it was totally normalized. My father was a theater critic, so he wrote thousands of words a week, on his electric typewriter, and my mother edited nonfiction books. So even though I went into like a different sort of writing, in that I wrote fiction and I wrote for TV shows and movies, it was a completely normal thing to say, like, I'm going to be a person who sits at a desk and writes words all day. That was totally normal.
Who were you? Is your talent more your mom or your dad? Or is it like a nice combo?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think in terms of like comedy, the person who was really funny was my mother's mother, my grandmother. And she had just a really bleak existential sense of humor and sort of a classic, like, all is lost.
Was she the Neanderthal, or she was also a Jew?
That's a good question. I think she was full. She was full Jew. She was full Jew.
Yeah. It's funny because both of those jobs are analytical in some ways.
Right.
Like editor and critic.
They're not creative jobs. They're assessing the success of creative work or editing a book and making it more efficient, and
And a lot of being a comedy writer and comedian is pattern recognition.
Right.
And which I would say you're excellent at.
Thank you.
Yeah, like you're you're really good at, like, where every piece of the New Yorker is just a pattern recognized and sort of sent through the processor and but yeah, that's it. So you think it could be from either one of them?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, what have you done about the anxiety?
Well, so yeah, the big thing I did was write a lot. And
when did you start writing, like, every day? Or
every single day, the summer after senior year of high school. That's like when I really was like, I'm going to do this professionally now,
So you'd gotten into Harvard.
Right.
You were hoping to get in the Lampoon.
Right.
And then every day you wrote what?
That summer I wrote a really bad novel, which I never showed to anybody. I wrote a number of like entire books at that period of my life that are like unpublishably bad. And they were sort of imitations of my favorite writers. A lot of people I think go through this where you start off by just copying your heroes.
And talk yourself into it not being a copy.
Yeah, it's different because the character has a completely different name. The font is different.
Yeah, so
it's like, what are we talking about?
Get off my case,
Relax.
When did you start hatching your own premises?
Sophomore year of college is really when I kind of started to write in a way that felt sort of like this is mine. Yeah. This is not just me like half remembering a Kids in the Hall sketch and forgetting that, or like ripping off a short story by T.C. Boyle or whatever. This is like I think I actually wrote this one. Yeah. I started to sort of feel that sophomore year. And
can you describe the feeling of that? Yeah. Because I'm picturing in my own experience of it where you're almost a little lightheaded. Yeah. Where you're like, this doesn't remind me of anything, and it's its own thing.
Yeah, it's thrilling. I mean, I remember sophomore year, I would sometimes spend like 2 or 3 hours frantically Googling every permutation of like a comedy piece I had written just to make sure. Yeah. Because I was like, I think this is good, and I'm really scared that it's plagiarized, which is a reason, partly just like that a window into my anxiety. Yeah. But also there was rationality to that impulse because at that point in my career, if you find yourself likely to
if you have a tendency to borrow, which you just will,
as a young writer, always. So I remember feeling really excited by like junior year of college or senior year of college. Like, I don't need to Google that because I know that one's mine. Yeah,
and in a similar vein, you have workaholism.
Yes.
You monetize your anxiety. Right. You're writing 4 to 6 hours a day.
And then I get hired
at SNL.
How do you
find the difference between you alone in a room and you in a room with 7 people that you need to interact with?
I don't mind other writers I love.
I didn't say writers. I said people.
That's a tough one.
Right.
Yeah, that's harder.
Yeah. So what's that like? Is it just a little panicky or is it just dread?
Both. But at SNL, it was the worst when I wrote something by myself because I couldn't hide, and I would have to, talk to all the department heads and all the intimidating people and navigate the sort of social bureaucratic waters. Talking to the hosts, I absolutely hated having to do that so much. But when I wrote with Merica and Mulaney, I would pretty much just hide after the writing part was done. To the best of my ability. I mean, like sometimes like Seth would be like, Simon, like where,
you're still here?
Where have you been? Yeah. Like props, needs to know like which props to put on TV. I'd be like, oh, right. I was
the good ones.
I was in the bathroom again, There was
me, I am Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't have had another cheese sandwich. I don't know. There was some failed sports show that had an abandoned, like derelict set that was on the 8th floor. I think in the area where Seth's show now is. Yeah. So before Seth had his show there, it was like a ruin,
an old haunted
ruin of like some failed nightly sports show. And I would go there, and only I knew how to. It felt like only I knew how to get there.
So funny.
And I would go through this tunnel of like old, boxes of late '90s baseball, information. And I would sit at the old like anchor's chair, and I would just like.
And you would be overcome.
Just like
you could
grip
be a
the sports
table, broadcaster.
And I would be like, okay, you're not a writer for SNL. You are the host for a late '90s, a late '90s, sports, I guess, Simon. Baseball.
You were once very athletic.
Yeah, right. And I would just think and I would sort of decompress. I would also sometimes take the elevator to random floors in 30 Rock, and just kind of, they were all abandoned, on Saturday. Yeah, because most people don't work then. So I would just go like to the 35th floor, and I would just like walk out of the elevator and just like sit in like a long hallway. My phone, meanwhile, is like,
would you
costumes need to
think
talk to you.
I'm being weird?
Yeah.
Would you think this is weird? Or would you just go, I have to do, I'm irrevocably drawn to this?
Well, I also thought it would be better for the sketch. That's the other thing, because
If you stayed
if
away
I just
from
got
it.
stay as far away from the production as possible. Yeah, when it was pencils down and there was no more writing to be done,
Yeah.
that's when I just wanted to be anywhere else.
But who would pick up the slack? Would
America
America?
and Mulaney would do my work for me.
I mean, that's fine.
They would do it all.
I mean, that, you know
Mulaney
what
would
I
talk
mean?
to the host.
Yeah.
America would talk to the costumes and sets, and I would be on the 35th floor.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sitting very still in the middle of the long carpet, just like yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with it now?
Well, I sort
Because
of
you've had TV shows.
I know I learned how to do it, and it's one of those things which I never because sometimes I'm writing sketches alone. Sometimes I'm in a situation where I do need to produce the sketches myself.
But they're whole TV shows, Simon.
Well, yeah, that came later.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but by the end of SNL, I had like begrudgingly learned
Yes.
the basics of how to produce TV,
Okay.
but like kicking and screaming. And what I was really doing when I was at SNL to deal with my anxiety is I was writing. So
For the show or just
No.
generally? Great.
So my solution to, it's like to use the fast food analogy again.
Yep.
It's like, okay, you're a child who is addicted to fast food. You tell everybody you know, someday I'm going to be a professional fast food taster. They're like, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Then it happens.
Yeah.
But it requires you to eat fast food like 14 hours a day. and on Tuesday, you have to stay up all night eating fast food.
Yes.
While like a very drunk celebrity like yells at you sometimes after like a dinner with Lauren
Sure.
Michaels.
Yep. Of course.
And you're like, this is really stressful. I know what I'll do to cope with it. On Sundays,
More fast food?
and my summer's off and weeks
Don't
off,
say more fast food.
I will eat more fast food than anyone has ever seen in their lives. So I actually wrote more when I was at SNL. I wrote more hours not for the show than for the show.
It was what became the books?
Entire books, yeah. I mean, when I was in the 4 years that I was at SNL, I wrote 3 books that were published, and at least 2 more that were too bad to publish. Plus, like articles.
And do you consider
screenplays.
yourself?
It was insane. Not my best work, by the way.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, do you consider yourself very inspired, or is it? It's a coping mechanism, fine.
Yeah.
But if you don't have premises, there's nothing like. So as a fellow writer, I'm like, I don't. First of all, there's far more destructive things to do.
Yeah. Google
Mulaney. There's far more destructive things to do with your free time, and you're very inspired. Are you inspired by? Are you excavating, or is it fairly involuntary?
The
ideas.
Yeah. Well, I'm not consciously saying
Thinking
to
of
myself
ideas.
like, I mean, the stories that I write are they're emotional. They're about emotional experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
They're like the characters in the story are often grappling with something that is a metaphor for something that I have recently experienced, right?
And is that a process that you encourage within yourself?
No.
Or it's just you're getting a fight with your girlfriend,
Yeah,
and then you end up with a version of Man Seeking Woman?
exactly. Yeah, it just happens organically.
Okay,
Yeah, I really do sit down and I'm like, I'm going to write something about vampires today.
great.
Truly. Like I'm going to write about robots. I'm going to write about a monkey. And then
when you end up in,
and then by the end of the story, you're like, this is very
It's not robots.
this is very similar to
something I'm going through.
Yeah, something I'm literally
Huh.
going through right now. What a coincidence! It happened again.
Yeah.
But I don't sit down and I'm like, well, what's a good metaphor through which to examine
Yeah,
grief?
yeah.
But it does not take even someone as tightly wound as me by the end of a story.
I gotta say, you don't seem that tightly wound. You seem maybe introverted, but not even that introverted.
There are much more introverted writers.
You're not. It's not like picking, pulling teeth with you. It's
I
like,
appreciate it.
No, it's not. It really isn't. It's not. You're personable. You're engaging. It's not like this whole time I haven't thought this kid might be autistic.
That's amazing.
I really don't think that.
That's a huge compliment.
It's maybe the nicest, and you look your age, and you're not. That's the nicest two things anyone can say about you. Like for real though, you're not. It's not uneasy.
Great.
Yeah. Is it from your point of view? What's it like?
Like this interview right now?
Yes, but more like what your experience is with interacting with people.
It's okay. It's fine. Like I'm not agoraphobic.
So what's the anxiety? Where's the anxiety come up?
The anxiety is kind of just a constant pulse in my brain that it's not really related to social interaction. The thing I was stressed out about at SNL was not, it was a little bit talking to people and talking to experienced, crew members who rightfully hated my sketch or whatever. There was a little bit that, of course. It was a little bit, holy shit, that's Paul McCartney. I'm afraid of Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
A little bit of what
we're all terrified.
Yeah, what you would expect. But most of it was.
He was in Wings.
Yeah, it's in fucking Wings. Yeah. Most of it was. Most of it was like I don't have any control over whether or not people are going to like my sketch.
Yeah.
It was fear.
So was it like a
mob.
weird guilt fear thing?
It was just like fear of failure.
You have a fear of mobs here.
Yeah.
Social media mobs.
Mobs in general, but yes.
Now the question is.
Yeah. I'm terrified of that crowd.
What crowd?
The SNL, when they would walk in.
Oh, the 300 people or whatever.
Yeah.
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 But they're all just like excited teenage girls.
At Dress, they're the excited teenage daughters of executives.
Yes.
And at Air, they're even more excited tourists from Chicago. Yeah. So they're harmless. But try telling that to me. But it did make a difference. Yeah.
And did you see them as discerning? Or you just didn't want to bomb?
Fear of bombing was,
I will say as a comedian, writing a sketch, producing it for 3 days, mounting it, and unveiling it to an audience is pretty laborious. It's a laborious way to eat shit.
Yeah. You're right. If you're gonna eat shit,
just say it.
Just scoop it out of the toilet. Don't spend 3 days like delicately slicing
seasoning
the shit.
it.
And, putting it in like a little,
getting it just right.
Yeah, right. Like the bear. And
amuse bouche. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, I understand, and it is like, I guess it's expensive if you're gonna write a sketch that eats shit and it costs $70,000.
Right.
In wood and paint.
Sure.
And cost.
Yeah.
Did you ever picture them going like, there he is? Like, how bad would the nightmare scenario be?
Well, I still have the nightmare scenario in my nightmares. Like I still have the literal SNL nightmare. Do you have?
I've ever heard this. I've worked at SNL 3 weeks in my entire life.
Yeah.
Pretty much since the early 2000s, even before Chappelle's Show, every night I've had a stress dream about Saturday Night Live. I'm not kidding.
Wait,
like I have 4 or 5 nights a week. It will be, I'm at SNL. I'm either on the 8th floor, 17th floor. I'm somewhere with Seth.
Yeah.
Wig, Bill.
Yeah.
Will Ferrell.
Right.
Lauren's pretty much every dream I have is Lauren's mad at me.
Same. Usually he's mad at me.
And by the way, Lauren I think likes me. I barely know him. We've gotten along.
He doesn't get mad very often. He's a very even keel person. Yeah. It's usually Lauren is mad. And also I'm supposed to be on camera, or I was supposed to go on camera and do something and I forgot. So in my nightmares, I'm often being thrust onto the SNL stage. And sometimes
Did you ever do like a Q&A in the monologue? Did you ever do like an audience member?
They would use me as an extra sometimes because I was so unusual looking.
Yeah. So
I would often play like, the kid or the cashier when they needed like a teenage extra.
Yeah.
They would use me.
Save money.
Right.
Using an adult. Yeah.
Exactly. Those were very frightening experiences. I mean, whenever I had to be like the extra, like in the background of a sketch, it felt very similar to, I don't really have like a big fear of heights, but it felt like standing on the edge of like a 300-foot tall cliff with like wind.
Yeah.
And just like being told like, okay, like we're not even going to pay you the $173 that an extra gets.
Yeah.
But what you do us a favor for 3 minutes, just like stand on the mouth of this cliff and you don't have to say anything or do anything. Just sort of stay there for 3.5 minutes.
Seth wrote this mouth of a cliff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
they need a person to stand on it. And there's going to be like screaming winds coming by you.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
The difference is some of us like it. Like, meaning like, I don't not get nervous when I do a Netflix or when I do a stand-up.
Right.
I get nervous every time.
Yeah.
But I said something to a friend of mine where if you have suicidal thoughts and they go, did you make a plan? Did you make a suicidal plan? And I go, yeah, I decided to do stand-up.
Yeah.
There's something suicidal about it where like you just go, I don't really care.
Right.
Like I'm terrified, but like the reward is worth it.
Yes.
And for you, there's no reward.
Right. I mean, it is ironic that for somebody with like a fear of mobs that I went into an industry in which my success is directly tied to my ability to appease those mobs.
Seduce a mob, yeah.
Right. But from afar, at least. And through actors and through pieces of paper.
Surrogates.
Yeah, there's this distance and through fictional characters.
Yeah.
You know, so many of my short stories are written in the first person. So they're from the point of view of a character that sounds nothing like me, you know. Is
your beef with yourself that you're average or that you're wretched? What do you think? What's the mob what's their charge against you?
Well, I think boring would be high on the list. I mean, you know, like I don't think there's anything interesting. Like I wouldn't want to read a story about myself. I wouldn't want to. Like I.
But you like again. But I guess what I'm getting at is Seinfeld has an observation of like comedians with low self-esteem, and he's like, "Oh yeah, and you're charging people to hear you talk." So with you, it's like you must think there's something redeeming about yourself if you're willing to publish books and sell them.
Well, yeah, I'm
no,
very proud of it.
Not your part of it.
Yeah.
Not just like you want to do this.
Yeah.
You must think you have merit in some way.
Well, I'm proud of the stories, but it's a separate thing. As a writer of fiction, it's like you're not asking the person to get on board. It's a weird. I know it's like
no. I know what you mean.
It's like you're not asking the person to get on board with you. You're asking them to get on board with your main character, who probably, or at least if you're me, is nothing like you and is way more interesting and exciting and fun to hear from. You know, I mean, like my audiobook for Glory Days is very graciously read by Mulaney.
Great.
That's a much better way, I think, for people to encounter my work than, for example, me reading it.
Yeah.
So I've long, even in high school. Even when I was in high school and writing like plays and like sketches, I would put my friends in it. I wouldn't be in them because I knew they would do a better job.
So you see it as like, which is a true and relatable thing. It's like, it's not even, you serve the idea. You're a vessel for the idea.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I would never, like, okay, I guess I could write a memoir from the perspective of like a 40-year-old borderline charming Jewish comedy writer, you know? Or I could write like a story from the perspective of Paul Revere's horse. Like I'd much rather do.
All right, here's a very broad question.
Much rather do the latter.
What do you think makes a likable person?
Person?
Yeah, or character.
They're different things. I feel like they're
okay, let me get more specific. What do you think is your best idea for a thing to make a character likable?
Well, it's just
because Paul Revere's horse.
Yeah,
I like him already.
I know. Well, he's an underdog.
Yeah, he's being ridden around. He's kind of a hero.
That story
works late, etc.
That story is basically he and Paul are friends.
Mm-hmm. He speaks, or it's telepathic.
He's telling the story. It's unclear how he's communicating with Paul. One of many withheld details that you'll find in my story. But he's friends with Paul, and it's his memoir, so you kind of have to take everything that this horse is saying with a grain of salt. But he and Paul, they make this plan to tell people that the British are coming, and they sort of we'll go in on this idea together. I'll ride there, because I'm a horse. You'll be on my back, and then because you can speak, you'll say, the British are coming. Just sort of 50-50 partnership.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good for this be the first night he speaks.
That'd be strange.
Speaks.
Exactly.
It's too much at once.
Yeah, so we'll
hat on a hat.
Totally. So we'll do this thing together, and they do it, and then Paul Revere kind of gets all the credit.
Yeah.
The horse is sort of forgotten.
Yeah.
And so it's this very bitter, celebrity bitchy memoir from the horse, just kind of describing how.
All right, but you know
Paul
what I'm
changed.
asking? The thing of what do you think makes a obviously horse is almost is too obvious.
Sure.
But there are.
Not too obvious for me, though.
But I'm saying, what do you think makes a character? What are your favorite things that you've done that make a character likable?
Well,
this is an odd question, but
there's a few things. There's a few things. I'll tell you all my tricks.
Great.
I mean, the first thing is I like it when a character is extremely stupid,
okay,
or naive or misinformed.
Okay,
it could be
but earnest.
Very deeply earnest.
Yeah.
Deeply convinced. Of whatever it is they think they know. That's why I write so often from the perspective of people who can't even speak English fluently. It's often I have a story called Unprotected, which is about a teenage boy trying to lose his virginity, and it's told entirely from the perspective of the condom in his wallet, which is waiting for years and years and years and years to be used.
Great.
And the condom is not particularly articulate because he's a piece of,
sure.
polyurethane. And so I love to write from the perspective of characters that know less than the reader. I just think that readers have a sympathy for people that are dumber than they are. So
I watched a fair amount of Man-Seeking Woman.
Yeah.
Jay Baruchel's character, I don't remember what you did to make him. There's a thing in screenwriting called save the cat, which is in the first 10 pages have the protagonist do something benevolent, save a cat from a tree.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what you did with Baruchel.
Well, in the very first episode, his girlfriend dumps him, and then he finds out that she's dating this older rich guy.
Yeah.
And he's really upset, especially when he meets him and finds out that it's literally Adolf Hitler, who is 137 years old, played perfectly by Bill Hader, and Maya Erskine is his ex-girlfriend, and she introduces him to Adolf, and Jay meets Bill in his motorized wheelchair, and
Hi, Adolf Hitler.
Josh Greenberg.
Greenberg?
Yes.
just doesn't really like this Hitler guy and thinks it's weird they're dating, and all of his friends
that weirdly does make Jay likable.
Yeah, and all his friends are just you just don't like him because he's dating Maggie, and also this is his party, and he paid for all this food, and so maybe just relax, and it ends with him having to apologize after an uncouth outburst. He has to apologize to Hitler. Hitler, of course, is so deaf because he's the oldest man alive. That he has to repeat his apology much louder and then louder a third time.
Great.
So
yeah, all right.
By the end of that episode,
relatable humiliation or isolation.
Absolutely. And then I would say, but if you want to get into the boring mechanics of it, basically you just need the character to really want something, and you need the audience or readers to want the character to get it.
What do you think makes a person in life likable?
Oh, that could be any number of things. And I like a lot of people that I would say would make terrible protagonists.
Yeah. Well, so you have more of a...
I like people who I think you might classify as antagonists.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. There's something satisfying about our friend and the asshole.
I love it.
And we're going to do asshole now.
It's great. Yeah, but you won't find them narrating my stories.
Great. Look for them on the street. One of your blocks is that you're 40 years old and you're generally the smallest.
Yes.
I think physical ability is an underrated liability. Meaning it's like women always talk about how they're smaller than, and it's like, I'm 150 pounds. I'm not walking around. You're less than 150 pounds. You're not walking around dominating situations and how it affects you.
Yes, it was a much more extreme thing when I was growing up. I think this is where my fear of mobs comes from.
Huh?
Is basically because I was...
Adults are terrifying when you're a kid, by the way. And then when you're little, when you're a small kid, even more so.
Yes. So I went to the same school for many years, so that it wasn't really... Being by far the smallest kid in my grade was not really a day-to-day issue because everybody was used to me.
Right.
And they knew what I looked like. And it was always a surprise coming back from summer that everybody had grown even more, you know?
Not me.
But so that was always like a tough day. But other than that, it was...
Who's small? Is your mom small?
Both sides of the family are extremely small.
Got it.
Yeah. Runs on both sides. I have many women in my family who are sub 5 foot. And yeah. But I was small even by the standards of my family. I was tested for dwarfism. They x-rayed my bones and, and they told me like, it's going to be fine. You're going to someday.
And they called you dwarf the whole time, right? In the
doctors.
Like, dwarf, walk over here, dwarf.
Yeah, right. They had a carnival barker out front and it's like, this is for a pediatrician.
Yeah, guys,
this is a bit
not
much.
Professional, yeah.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was good, sort of nice music.
You met some cool carnival.
Yeah, exactly.
And what did that inform?
Well, so it didn't affect my day-to-day, but it was a big deal whenever I encountered new kids. So if our school, for example, had to play another school in sports, or if there was like a dance, God forbid, in middle school with like another school, or the first day of a new Hebrew school or camp, was always, basically like a full P.T. Barnum situation where when people saw me, it was like, it was an absolute circus-like atmosphere. I was like I looked like 4 to 6 years younger than everybody.
Yeah.
And so, like an MC, like a ringmaster would like emerge typically, usually like a tall, like loud
like,
kid.
Look at him.
And then a crowd would gather and they would always like bring forth like their own short kid. To see, like, to measure us back to back to see who was shorter, and I would always be shorter even than their champion, and me and the other short kid would kind of like exchange like a weary, like, all right, it's a living,
Yep.
and so those are bad days, and so that sort of punctuated my childhood.
Were you verbally funny back then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could like,
but there wasn't time when you're
it's
when
all
you're
happening
like when
coming
it's like a 3-ring circus.
Yes,
you don't have time to
be
like, hey, do you guys, it would be really funny if like in school lunches, if instead, can't really get into your
observation.
Material. Yeah, you're like too busy like being like measured by a ringmaster, and so as a result, from an early age, I really feared and disliked crowds, and I think I was probably like you and every other comedy writer from our generation, hugely obsessed with The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite character on The Simpsons was not an individual character; it was the collective character of the mob, which made me laugh so hard. And it's the mob, the crowd of the Springfield mob on Simpsons is depicted as even stupider than Homer. Like
I think correctly so.
The dumbest character on the show. Like
I always feel like groundskeeper, what's his name, and the guy from the bar would be like the featured speakers in the mob.
Well, yeah, and Mo is often
Mo was like toward the front.
Yeah, right, exactly. Shouting the most inane thing you've ever heard, and everybody screams and breaks glass over their head. And also and Mo is a character who is on The Simpsons, while of course dumb in many ways, as all characters on that show are. You wouldn't call him necessarily the dumb one. I mean, Homer is the dumb one.
Yeah.
But when Mo is inside that mob, he becomes consumed by idiocy.
Yeah.
And anyone who is part of the mob, walking with them, their IQ just automatically drops like 75 points. So that's all. When I think about like a crowd of people, I think of the Springfield mob, and I think of like being like physically measured on the first day of every camp. I think like, and that's why I don't do it's another reason why I stay away from social media and the internet, is I'm like, that is the mob. And if I start doing posts or whatever.
And it doesn't matter when something goes in that direction, there's nothing you can say to stop them. There's literally nothing. They'll just take it as a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll beat you. And they'll be wrong. They'll be dead wrong.
It doesn't matter.
And will get support from people.
Yes. You cannot reason with the Springfield mob. And that's when I think of the internet, I think of the Springfield mob.
You're absolutely right. I got mobbed on the internet about the movie Parasite. Because I said, by the way, the rich people aren't the parasite. And I got mobbed because it basically became like, you rich person thinks they're not. I'm like, so anyone who, and it was like one of the last things I ever did on the internet on because it was so stupid. And by the way, the director of the movie, writer-director, was like, both sides are parasites.
That's a double meaning.
Right. But I would argue with him.
Sure.
Because all they're doing, they were decent bosses.
Mm-hmm.
So am I a parasite for going to Starbucks? I'm just consuming.
Yeah.
I'm like, so unless I start a coffee farm and pick my own beans, brew my own coffee, I'm a parasite. It doesn't make any sense. Parasites are leeching off of a thing that doesn't want them. Whereas I'm just a consumer. Again, I'm not. It's not over. It's 5 years.
I'm afraid to talk to you about it because I've heard that this is an internet thing, and I want to stay away from it.
Yeah, no, you're right to stay away. You've
told me this is like, I'm like, oh, this is.
You can see it getting out of hand.
If I say anything, you've told me that this is an internet mob related thing.
Yes, I better stay in the car.
And I'm like, I'm not gonna answer.
Don't even engage.
Yeah.
Don't be like me. You're not wrong. The fact that you saw Facebook is like, I find it historically like riveting.
I would be because
it's a weird version of the Social Network.
Yes.
Like it's a weird version of the movie, which
like
I actually didn't. The movie I have problems with, but
it's like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of like, I'm like a minor peripheral character in the drama of the Social Network, which is playing out like literally next to me, physically next to me. And I'm in the corner watching this and I'm like, I don't want to get mixed up in this shit. But I do think my life would have been very different if I had made the decision to be on social media. I think I would have written a lot fewer books.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've written 10 books. I think I would be lucky if I had had time to write like 3 or 4. If I had spent the number,
because you'd be busy posting and coming up with premises.
Just like truly the number of hours that it takes to be funny online.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, I know a lot of people who do it.
It's consuming,
It's a lot of hours. And so I think I would, and so I also don't think that my books were very good until about like the 5th or 6th book.
Why?
Because I hadn't practiced writing enough.
Interesting.
Because I was still learning like how to do it.
And was it weak premises or weak execution?
Story.
Yeah.
Story. And so I feel
premise or
no, the premises were always.
You just think you didn't do them right.
Yeah. I don't think I did them right for a while. And so if I had been on social media and I was still on book 3, I maybe never would have written any books that I was proud of.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm very grateful. At the same time, maybe people would know about the books. So that's sort of that's kind of, I often think of like the sliding doors. Like what would my life be like if I had gone the sort of social media, internet quips route? I would have fewer books, but they wouldn't be as good. But
and you'd get your advances will be bigger.
Right. More people would
more
read
sales.
them. Yes. It would be a different life.
Yeah.
Instead, I've written like 10 more obscure books.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about them, but I've made this sort of deal where,
Yeah.
very few people know about
I
them.
mean, again, you could say you're 24. No one would question it. You could just change your name.
Go on social media tomorrow. And
Yeah,
just be like,
change your name.
Yeah.
You could. Half your shit would be great tweets anyway.
Yeah, just say, pretend that I'm coming up with it now.
Yeah. One's gonna. If you think anyone's gonna look it up, you think anyone's gonna do? You're fucking out. You really overestimate people.
Go to their local library.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
yes.
see.
And now you're married. How long have you been married?
Since 2015.
And how do you like? How long you been with your wife?
We met in college, split up, got back together.
Great.
One of those, yeah.
Great. And how do you like it?
It's great. It's fantastic. She's a writer too.
Great.
Her name's Kathleen Hagle, and she writes incredibly violent true crime nonfiction, which is
great.
Absolutely thrilling to read. She wrote a book called Slender Man, which was a finalist for the Edgar Prize.
Great.
And it's about those 3 12-year-olds in those 2 12-year-olds in Wisconsin that stabbed that other 12-year-old to serve Slender Man, the internet demon.
Yeah.
It's an amazing book.
Is that lucrative for her?
I mean, by the standards of Hollywood, I mean,
right, but I'm saying, like, it seems like that's a good business to be in.
It's great. I mean, it's incredible for anyone to get paid to write.
Yeah.
To write paper books, to write for paper magazines. I mean, it's Kathleen and I both feel like super lucky. Like, she writes for Vanity Fair. I write for the New Yorker, paper magazines that people like physically hold in their hands. There are very few magazines left.
What is do you know the circulation of the New Yorker? Is it down significantly on paper?
So it's over 1 million, but under 2 million. I think it's low millions. Vanity Fair is a little bit higher, but only slightly.
We're talking paper.
Paper.
Got it. And digital
I hope I don't
what?
I have to tell a story. I hope I don't get in trouble for this.
Please.
So this is a story I was told to me by somebody who works at the New Yorker, and I hope I don't get in trouble with Condé Nast for real. Okay, it's so funny though. I have to tell it to you. So, so he was visiting he's on the business side. He's visiting a call center, and the Condé Nast call center, and it's sort of the hub for all customer service.
Right. And the Condé Nast magazines would be New Yorker, Vanity Fair,
Vogue, a few others.
Yeah.
Anyway, so whenever somebody calls with an issue, like their magazine arrived late or it arrived, wet, you rectify the issue, and then part of the script is then you say, while you're on, can I ask you to subscribe for another year?
Yeah.
That's just part of the call center script. Said he was there for 4 calls. With all of them New Yorker subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
Each time they said no, and the reason they gave was always the same, which is, I think by next year I'll be dead.
Yeah.
So that's to say the subscription base is a little bit rocky right now.
Yeah, it's up against.
It's not what I would call a growth industry. Yeah.
Yeah, and what do you have a parental ethos?
I think just open-mindedness. Yeah.
What's your goal for them? Because I'm dealing with a kid, and it's interesting to think about it in a way I've never thought about it, which is like, what am I going for here? What are we trying to encourage?
My goal is to not have a goal. My goal is to be, decent, of course, and try to, teach them how to read and shit. But basically, like, to not write a script for them because I'm such a goal-oriented person.
Yeah.
I've always been like a very like regimented and focused, and I have like my goals. Some of them stupid, but they're still goals.
Yep.
And I like very determined not to treat my children as if they were like projects or books.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to treat my kids like they're books. Where I'm like, I am excited. I'm going to spend years on this, and it's going to turn out a certain way, and here's what people are going to think of it, and here's how I want people to react to it.
Well, I'm with you. Do you have any goal for them? What do you think it's the same question of like, what makes a likable person? What makes a successful human project?
I want them to be confident. self-aware, and kind, polite, basically.
Comfortable in a mob? Near a mob?
Agnostic about that. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah. They can, if it really makes them happy to lead a mob, if that's what
God
it
bless.
is, if they're just like, they feel that brick in their hands.
I got a
and
mob.
They're like, this is my, this is what I was meant to be.
Yeah.
I would be like startled, but I would say, you know what? Like, I will come and I will hold a broken bottle behind you, and we'll burn down that religious structure together. Whatever
Fantastic.
it is. Yeah.
It was great talking to you, man.
Great talking to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Great shit.
Thanks. Thank you.